welcome to this edition of Martha Monday. Well, as we come to the end of the year, it's also the end of a month, and that means it's time for us to introduce our new version of the monthly do-it list. This is for January 2021. This little handy tool we have been publishing here at Cross My Heart since summer. Before that, I developed it and it was published by another blog, but we have so many women who have found this so very helpful. It sort of was birthed out of the way I approached managing home and hearth during all those years of raising my family, and now it's just almost embedded in my mind. I sort of know what I need to do to pace myself a little each day to keep home and hearth kind of managed and clean and organized. I think the thing that makes this such a powerful tool for us is that it's all on one page. You don't need a complete 3-ring binder to keep track of everything. It's conveniently organized into daily and weekly and monthly tasks. You don't have to do the whole thing in one day. You just pace yourself a little each day. One of the things that we added to the list is to drop everything and read, just to read one chapter a day. That may be carving out 15 minutes. It may be stopping in the middle of the day for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. But I think all of us probably have a pile of books somewhere in our home that we keep meaning to get to. We want to read those books. We have told ourselves we're going to read them, and it just never quite happens. And so it's sort of like everything else in life. You just have to do it a little bit at a time, and you have to make a plan to make it happen. I know many women use reading as a pleasure and as an escape, and so you may find yourself reading a lot of romance or fiction or even mysteries, something like that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't really expand your knowledge base. It doesn't broaden your mind. It doesn't teach you new things. So my challenge for you is, if you're a fiction reader, to incorporate at least 1 or 2 nonfiction books into your reading this year to help spur you on. All of us can really challenge ourselves to be lifelong, lifetime learners. I want to share today, I'm going to go down through a list of a few of the books I read this year. Now, my regular viewers will know that last year, about a year ago at this time, I did a reading list for 2020, and I'm going to sort of give myself an evaluation and let you see what I actually followed through and read this year. A couple that I didn't get through, I'm going to put back into the cycle for 2021, but in my defense, I added some new ones that weren't on the list. I'll include all of these in a link below if you want to follow these to Amazon and buy them yourself and add them to your list. I would love for you to do that. And if you follow that link, I do want to mention it is an affiliate link, so with a couple of pennies that will come back to me if you buy that book, maybe if enough of you do it, I'll be able to buy myself 1 cup of coffee. So here we go. I began the year by reading Kathy Lee Gifford's The Rock, the Road, and the Rabbi. This was in prep for the trip that I was planning to take and did not get to take, but hope I will get to take, to Israel. Then, Mere Christianity. I've always wanted to read it cover to cover by C.S. Lewis. I ended up listening to this on tape, and I just loved it. The voice was that English accent. It was just so powerful. I'll probably go back and read it in print version again at some point, just so I can highlight it and mark it up. And I do have a little study guide that I would eventually like to get to. Speaking of Audible, I also went through 2 or 3 other of C.S. Lewis's book, listening to those on the Audible as I was just in the car and driving for those few hours. I listened to Until We Have Faces, The 4 Loves, and a couple others that are not coming to mind right now. Maybe not all of them were C.S. Lewis books. I read The Hiding Place. It had been many years since I had read this. Just a precious, astonishing story about just an ordinary woman who God used to do such remarkable things. Corey is so inspiring, and of course one of those women that if we know the Lord Jesus Christ, we will get to meet in heaven one day. Then I read God's Space by Doug Pollock, just on how to share our faith. My son had recommended this book, and I enjoyed it very much, picked up a few little tools and tips. Chuck Swindoll's a favorite author, and his book on Paul has been helpful as I have prepared to teach Romans this year. So there's that one. Godward Life by John Piper. This is sort of a daily devotional sort of a book, and I've read a few of these and skipped around. I didn't completely finish it. I probably continued to leave it on my bedside table because I typically read one of his almost articles or devotionals at night before I go to bed. They're just 2 or 3 pages, but something good to chew on. And of course, Piper's always solid and a good author. I have really enjoyed this book by George Bush called Decision Points. It's sort of his autobiography about his administration. I think it gave me an inside look at the challenges that would flow to any presidency, but the unique challenges that came during the Bush administration made me very grateful for this godly man and his powerful leadership skills. Reminds me, the verse that comes to mind when I think of George Bush is that to whom much is given, much is required. And he had a rocky start in his life, but he found his way and stewarded the influence and the privileges that had come to his life. Powerful leader. I just came to just love and respect President Bush so much more as I was reading through his book. I'm almost finished with it. I have a couple more chapters, or just a few more pages actually to go to complete it, and that will happen before the end of the year. At night, I have this on my bedside as well called The Book of Amazing Stories. It's just a little story from history, one for each day of the year. I wasn't faithful reading this every single night, but there were just some interesting stories. A little lighthearted reading, tied it back to a verse of scripture. I'll probably leave this on my bedside still and maybe read one of those again as we go through the year. I've enjoyed Max Lucado's devotional because of Bethlehem this year during the holiday season. Also picked up another devotional called Advent that I'm reading as well. I should have had that in here in the pile and I forgot about it. I've read The Prodigal God, Recovering the Heart of the Christian Faith by Tim Keller. Tim Keller is just one of my favorite pastors. I learned so much from him. I listened to a lot of his podcasts and his preaching and learned so much from him. This is another one that wasn't on my list that I added, Miracle in the Gobi, the Great Gobi Desert of Mongolia, written by Diane Walker Knight, about just a miraculous story of God's provision for her husband when he really should have lost his life. So Cliff has become a friend of her husband, has become a friend of my husband's, and so we read their book together, her book about his experience. This was a fun read. I picked this up at Goodwill and enjoyed it so much. Many of you remember Kirk Cameron, sort of the teenage idol. Well, he's all grown up now, and the title of his book about his life is called Still Growing. So that was a good read, and I just enjoyed hearing how someone who's famous and who's done very well is serving the kingdom. This was another book that I added that I didn't have on my reading list to begin with, and I can't even remember who recommended it to me, but it's In the Land of Blue Burqas by Kate McCord. I think that's a pseudonym. She went and lived in Afghanistan, and I just learned so much about the culture there, especially for women in that perspective, and just appreciate the inside look that she gave me to women there. This was another book that I enjoyed very much. David Nasser came and spoke at our church, and it's called Jumping Through Fires, an Iranian exile and former Muslim. And so this man, who's now a pastor, grew up in Iran. His family came here. Just an amazing story about him coming to know Christ, and now he is in full-time ministry. And I just enjoyed hearing him speak in person, and then because I enjoyed that so much, my husband bought me that book, and I read that this year. I reread Living Out of the Overflow. I just appreciate Dr. Richard Blackaby so much. When I was a hospital chaplain, I went to a chaplaincy training at Ridgecrest in North Carolina, and he was the speaker, and I got his book, Living Out of the Overflow. I read it a few years ago when I heard him speak, and then I did an online class with Richard and his son Daniel earlier in the spring, and so I went through the workbook, read the book again. I think the book is, I've loaned it to a friend, so it's not here now, but I read that one again as well and enjoyed it so much, as much the second time as I did the first. These are the books I did not get to, so I'm going to add them back to my reading list for 2021. Shadow of the Almighty by Elizabeth Elliot. Her story is incredible. The wife, the widow of Jim Elliot. So this is will be a good read. I read it years ago. And then Meeting God at Every Turn by Catherine Marshall. I think I also read this as a very young woman and want to reread it again. And this is called The Christian Secret of a Happy Life by Hannah Whitall Smith. So all three of these by Christian women authors, and I'm going to get to those. Another big commitment that I'm making this year, I want you to see how big and thick this book is. There we go. Over 50 chapters, close to 60 chapters. It's dense and good. I am so thankful for Wayne Grudem. He takes topics of theology and makes them understandable to lay people like you and me. So I have so appreciated this book. I've jumped all around it. I've learned much from Dr. Grudem as I have prepared to teach Bible study, but I've decided that instead of jumping around to hit different topics, I really want to go through it step by step, page by page, cover to cover this year. So with over 50 chapters, I'm going to sort of loosely give myself a goal of tackling one chapter a week, and then there'll be a couple of weeks in there, or maybe during a week of vacation, where I'm going to try to cover two. But I'm going to really try to take this on as a study time, that I sort of need to keep equipping myself as I'm teaching Bible study and preparing. This year I'm teaching through the book of Romans, and of course that's heavy in theology, and it's drawn my heart to this great book. So I'm going to try to make it. We'll see how far I do. If I feel like I'm being rushed, I may just spread this out over a couple of years. But I want to get through Systematic Theology by Wayne Grudem this year. And then these are the new ones that I'm adding. Let me pull these over. And again, I'm going to add a list. You can download a link with my reading list and links to all these if you want to get them. Some of them I've picked up at a used book sale, and that would be this one. Warren Wiersbe is my go-to every single time when I'm studying the Bible and I need a commentary to equip me to teach. So whatever book I'm teaching through, the first commentary that I order is the one by Warren Wiersbe. He has written this little book called 10 People Every Christian Should Know. And these are just famous people from throughout history, just a little short biography about each one of them. And so I really do enjoy biographies, and sometimes I use those stories in my teaching. If you follow the way that I teach, you know that I just like to open with a little story to sort of perk the interest or add a little analogy to the teaching and the passage we're going to unpack together. So sometimes a little short biography like this might give me an idea of something that I can use in my teaching. So I'm going to read that one. I don't think it will take long. Again, another one by Tim Keller, who I just am so grateful for his ministry and his teaching and his good mind. This one is called Counterfeit Gods. And again, another one by Richard Blackaby. This is sort of a devotional. It's 101 Biblical Reflections, and it's called The Inspired Leader, so it's really has a bent towards leadership, and I want to be a woman who stewards my influence well. I'm not in a huge leadership position, but in the Bible study I teach, we have 12 small groups and 5 Zoom groups that are meeting. So there's a fair number of women that in that sense I am leading, and I just want to always be challenging myself to be a good example to them and to encourage them to live out their full potential and steward their gifts well. This is another historical one. It's called The Greatest War Stories, 100 Tales from Military History to Astonish, Bewilder, and Stupefy. So these are the greatest war stories never told. So again, I'm sure I'll find a couple of good analogies or little stories there. And because we're such history buffs at our house, I'm sure that some of these I'll enjoy sharing with my husband and with my children as well. This is a compilation of sermons by Warren Wiersbe. It's called Classic Sermons on Revival and Spiritual Renewal. And as I find myself in a place that I'm praying for our country, praying for revival in our land, I hope that some of these historical sermons will spur me on and encourage me as I keep praying that we will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, and that we will see revival in our country and in our world. I haven't read a book on marriage in a while. I have a strong marriage. I love my husband. He and I are committed to one another. I do find myself in a position once in a while as I mentor women and encourage them that I am encouraging women in their marriages. And of course, my marriage, like every marriage, is never going to be perfect, and I want to keep learning and growing as well. So I ordered this book by Francis Chan and his wife Lisa, and it's called You and Me Forever. So it has a catchy little title. This is another one by Warren Wiersbe. It's Jesus in the present tense. It's looking at all the I am statements of Christ. And I thought this might be a good book for me to read to prepare my heart for Easter. So there's that one. I've got a couple on prayer that I want to add. I feel like I'm a strong student of the Word, but I'm always trying to push myself to develop a stronger prayer life. I would say that maybe I'm still in kindergarten or first grade when it comes to cultivating a really committed, dedicated prayer life. So this is by Gary Thomas. It's called Sacred Pathways. Discover your soul's path to God. So there's that one. There's another one by Richard Foster on prayer, Finding the Heart's True Home. So I'm going to try to read that one. And there's one more on prayer. I'll go ahead and pull it out. This is by John Eldridge called Moving Mountains. Some of you, I may have mentioned before, our family's tradition of having a little book exchange on Christmas Eve. And so the book that I got when we did our Christmas gift book exchange, we did a little earlier this year, early in December, is this one called The Storm Before the Storm, The Beginning of the End of the Roman Republic by Mike Duncan. So my son Kyle put this in the book exchange. He listened to a series of podcasts by Mike Duncan and really liked it. And so he got this book, and it's kind of long, but I'm going to try to give it a whirl and listen to it. And then this one was one that was in last year's book exchange, and I didn't get it, but I've heard good things about it, and then I saw it in a used bookstore, so I decided to pick it up. It's called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. So I'm going to try to give that a read. And then finally, one more. I know this is an ambitious list, and this is another one of my favorite authors for many, many years. Charles Swindoll, such a godly man, such a faithful man. Love his wit, his wisdom, have learned from him through the years. I started reading books by Swindoll back in the 80s, and this one is called The Mystery of God's Will. What does he want from me? And I think that's a question that many of us ask. So if you were inspired by any or all of these, you can check out my book list on the link below. Thanks so much for spending this time with us as we wrap up the old year and we prepare for the new year. Perhaps thinking about making a commitment to read could be something you could challenge yourself to do. Maybe your book list will not be as ambitious as mine. Maybe you'll just commit to read 1 or 2 books of nonfiction this year, but I hope you'll accept that challenge. If you have read a good book this year, leave me a note below and let me know, let all of our viewers know the name of that book and the author, and maybe we'll look that up as well. And if you are thinking about reading a book or you're planning to read a new book for the new year, let us know that one as well. Thanks so much for spending this time with us. Remember, we'll also be adding a link below to our Do It list for the month of January, and you can download that. So in the meantime, enjoy the few days that are left in 2020. I know many of us are going to be, perhaps for the first time in many years, a little glad to see that year go by. But we know that the Lord works through all events and circumstances. It's been a year of learning and growing and learning new things about Him and new things about ourselves. So I hope that you'll download our Do It list, give that a whirl. I hope that the new year finds you reading. My friends, be blessed. Know that God loves us no matter what our circumstances are. Thanks so much, and have a blessed new year. Happy New Year to you from all of us here at Cross My Heart Ministry.